Welcome to Joe College Radio. I'm Miles King, joined by my co-host Jordan Lenderman. How are you doing today, Jordan?
I'm doing great, Miles. We had a great weekend of college football, and I'm excited to discuss it.
Yeah, we've got a great show lined up here. Quick note, we're recording this on Sunday afternoon instead of Monday night due to the OSU College of Engineering Career Fair being on Tuesday. I didn't want to have a late night of recording the night before because I need to be firing all cylinders, make it a good impression there, and our schedules just didn't line up to get it done early tomorrow. So without further ado, let's jump right in. OSU versus Pittsburgh. This was a huge game for the Cowboys, and they came out on top, which gets them some good momentum going into next week. Starting right in, let's get on Mason Rudolph. He went 540 yards, 26-46, and he threw 2 touchdowns through the air, set the school record for passing in a single game yesterday. And to be honest, Jordan, I didn't think he played that well.
I'm going to have to agree. His stats were definitely padded by one of the most amazing games I've seen by a wide receiver, especially in recent history. James Washington, nobody could keep up with him. Anytime he ran a fly route, they were right about 10 yards behind him. There's just no chance for any of those safeties or corners to keep up. And even having a safety deep and a corner pressing him, there's just no chance for those defenders.
Yeah, he was just running free the entire first half. I believe he had 225 yards at halftime. But there's just something off about Rudolph so far this year. I don't know if he's got a small injury that's bothering him or if he just isn't settling down yet. But, I mean, he was throwing some bombs. But at the same time, there were a lot of intermediate throws that he was overthrowing or just plain bad throws, not throwing anywhere near the receiver. So hopefully, if the Cowboys are going to win next week at Baylor, he needs to step it up and get his A game on. The rushing game was much improved this week, though. Rennie Childs going over 100 yards. He scored 4 touchdowns, including a long 63-yarder. With the quarterback sacks and running, they had 32 carries for 100 yards. That's 3.1 yards per carry. If you take out Rudolph's sacks and his scrambles, they had 25 rushes for 118 yards for 4.7 yards a carry. So I think that's markedly better than they did last week, and I'm very impressed that they didn't just abandon the run game because I thought it did pretty well this week.
That's absolutely true. Much better from the offensive line, but I still want to see more runs and better timing. Some of the runs, it was very predictable. A first down run was their go-to, and you didn't see a whole lot of second down runs unless there was a very effective first down run. So I'd like to see Yurcich mix up the play calling a little bit and maybe throw in all 3 run plays in a row. I don't know if he's done that in his tenure, but I'd like to see something like that just so they know the opposing team knows that they can't load the box on first down and then spread out after first down.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I'm pretty sure that if we had a run for no gain, or we threw an incomplete pass first down, I don't think we ever ran the ball on second or third down. So I think they definitely need to mix that up. OSU, they really could have blown this game wide open at the end of the first half. They were driving. It was 24-10, and then Mason Rudolph on the handoff fumbles, going back again to he's not having a great start to the season. On the handoff, he just drops the ball. Pitt's able to go down, make it a game at halftime, and we were really on track to blow the game out of the water and win it quite comfortably. But at the end, almost went to overtime, if not for a late bomb from Rudolph to Juwan Seals that gets us to the 1-yard line.
And you know what? I have to say something about OSU's defense. They are grossly underperforming this year. They gave up just about 300 rushing yards and 567 total yards. So they're going to have to step up if they want to keep up with these Big 12 offenses. Texas's offense is very similar, a high-power offense, but their defense is also very similar, just giving up 40 points a game, 50 points a game. And so you can't expect to do that week in and week out and get the results you want.
I'll have to disagree with you a little bit there. I thought the defense played not great, but I thought they played a pretty good game. They held Pittsburgh to 4 of 18 on third downs at 22%. So they did a great down on third down defense. Didn't get a lot of turnovers except for that last game-clinching interception. But at the same time, Pitt's not a team that likes to throw the ball, so there's a lot less chances to get an interception. And with James Conner, he's going to hold on to the ball and not fumble.
And I'll agree.
I really thought the offense kind of put them in some bad situations. They're kind of stalling drives in the third and fourth quarter. The 2 turnovers, the offense definitely didn't put the defense in a position to succeed.
I mean, I'd have to agree with that initial point. Their third down defense was phenomenal, and they had a very timely defense. Whenever they needed to make a stop, generally they make a stop, but bend don't break isn't fantastic to live by. But, I mean, they've pulled out a win with it, and if they can continue to do that, that's fantastic. But I don't see it as a long-sustaining regimen to live by.
Yeah, but definitely a huge win this weekend for the Cowboys.
Absolutely.
If they lost this game, they'd be going into a tailspin, going into Big 12 conference play with Baylor and Texas, the first 2 teams there. So hopefully this gets some momentum going forward, and they're able to go play a great game next weekend. Let's move on to Arkansas versus Texas State. Now, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't able to really watch anything, but Jordan, what's your take on what happened?
And, I doubt that anyone that wasn't at the game watched this game. Everyone knew from the beginning it was going to be over, and that's exactly how it happened. 35-0 at the end of the first half. I wanted to encourage all of our listeners out there, anytime our running back Raleigh Williams scores a touchdown, to tweet out the hashtag Raleighluya. It's going to catch on. I pitched it to some of the fans in the student section, and they loved it, so I would love your participation in that. Brandon Allen. I sound like the ESPN announcers. Austin Allen played lights out with 16 for 21. He didn't have a whole lot of passes, but very, very good very good long ball, which that's been the highlight since the spring game. Everyone's talking about his ability to throw it deep. But he also completed the intermediate pass well, and that's something we weren't sure about. And I'm very excited to see how he does against Texas A&M this weekend. That'll be a phenomenal game. And it's his first really big test since TCU taking a week off pretty much, now back to one of the better Texas schools. It'll be interesting to see how he fares in that game. But like I said, Raleigh Williams, 19 carries, 121 yards. He eclipses the 100-yard mark again. After his season-ending neck injury last year, he really doesn't seem to have any reservations. He's going and laying it out all out on the line. And he looks phenomenal so far. And one key component of this game was the Arkansas defense, holding Texas State to 105 total yards. They played phenomenal the entire game, and there really wasn't any doubt in my mind that they would not score a touchdown. So the field goal was a little bit disappointing. Skipper almost blocked it again. That would have been phenomenal. I'm sure the fans would have gone crazy, but
yeah, I think he should be going for a block a week, honestly.
I agree, and he's loving the attention too. He really wants to get in there and block every chance he can. So, but yeah, just to get back to the point, this is never close. The only reason we're covering this is because I attend the University of Arkansas. So. It was not an interesting game. It was fun to be an Arkansas fan. It was nice to pay Texas State a couple $1 million to come down here so we could whoop their butts. But we're gonna get back to real football next week against Texas A&M, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, like you said, and we'll talk more about this later. They've got a big game next week, but they took care of business. Austin Allen, very efficient, exactly what you'd want, exactly how you'd want them to perform against lesser competition like Texas State. Moving on to the big matchups of the week. First off, we've got Alabama versus Ole Miss, a.k.a. the evil Galactic Empire versus the Rebel Alliance. And the last 2 years, episode 4 and 5, the Rebels came out on top, but the evil Empire finally finishes them off in episode 6. What do you think of the game, Jordan?
Miles, I haven't heard that before. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I honestly, I didn't have any doubts that Alabama was going to win the game. My brother asked me as I was leaving a tailgate party. It was right before halftime. Alabama was down big, and he said, "Do you think Alabama's going to come back?" And I said, "Yeah." Based on how they've played this year, I didn't have any doubts that they wouldn't come back, and they proved that they can go down early and still make a game out of it. And this is a team that comes to play against Alabama every year, this Ole Miss squad. So. Hats off to Alabama. They really took a punch to the jaw and kept fighting.
Yeah, mark of the champion that you're able to get up when you'd been knocked down. Going going down 24-3 and then coming back to win is no small task.
Absolutely.
Alabama just dominated on the ground game, over 300 yards rushing, averaging 7 yards a carry. It's just insane.
Yeah, those big boys up front, they're said on ESPN to be the least experienced part of their team, but gosh, they look like a bunch of veterans up there with Bo Scarborough, who might even be scarier than Derrick Henry to tackle. Not quite as skilled, but he's a scary guy to tackle. He'll bowl right over you.
Yeah, the question is, Jordan, who can stop this team? Legitimately, who can stop them? LSU's not looking strong. They get past Ole Miss. I mean, if Arkansas comes on, maybe they'll have a chance. But really, it's who's going to stop Bama?
You know, and it's tough to say at this point, but I think this weekend Ole Miss proved that there's no team, and you can argue Louisville, but there's no team that can't be beaten. They played them close. And even though they dominated on the ground as much as they did, they're still able to give them a good fight, only losing by 5. And so I can see Arkansas challenging them. Definitely if they beat Texas A&M, they're going to be high on themselves. They'll think they can beat anybody. And so I could see that Arkansas squad taking them down. Really, other than that, Texas A&M could. You have an Auburn team that has a great defense, but they can't put anything together on offense. So there aren't a whole lot of teams in the SEC that can compete with this dominant Alabama squad, but you have a couple of teams that might have a shot.
Yeah, and quick note before we move on to the next game, Ole Miss, in their 2 games against top 25 or top 10 opposition, held a 20-point lead in each and blew it and lost the game. They're sitting at 1-2. Their fans must be playing the what-if game right now, because that's got to be so disappointing. Because they obviously have the quality, but they just keep choking when it matters.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next big game, Ohio State versus OU. And this one, it was never really close.
Yeah, the scoreboard made it look a little bit closer than it was, but the rushing attack of Ohio State, it was phenomenal. Not what I expected at all. And to almost put 300 yards, just about 5 yards or 9 yards shy of 300 yards rushing on this basic Oklahoma defense, and it was horrible to see. And you know what? Austin Kendall has got to he's probably being punished in the locker room by his team after this game, because this is another moment where you see a player opening his mouth before the game, and that's just giving another team, a very good team, bulletin board material that you can't afford to give them.
Yeah, what a moron that you have to say that. And I don't know whether the show, I know it was on like
it was on a local broadcast,
show.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know whether it was live or not, but if it was recorded and they didn't edit that out, whoever decided not to edit that out should be fired immediately. You cannot let a player go on and say that and give the opposition, like you said, bulletin board material, a reason to get fired up and play hard.
And what's Bob Stoops doing letting his backup quarterback go on the radio and talk about the game? And a freshman, a true freshman at that. He doesn't have the experience on the field or in a press conference. So I'm at a loss for words on why they let him go in there and do an interview.
Yeah, you're the backup quarterback. Your job is to put on the headset and hold the clipboard on the sideline, not be making statements about how bad your opposition's defense is. But really, OU fans are going to be pretty disappointed. But I think what it just comes down to is that Urban Meyer is a damn good coach, and Ohio State just has better athletes. Their last 4 recruiting classes have been 3, 5, 6, and 7. And OU, the highest one OU's had, I think, was 12 or 13.
Yeah, Ohio State is always able to market to those players. And Urban Meyer coming on staff a couple of years ago, that just made it even easier for them to recruit. He's a fantastic coach, and he gets his boys ready to play. And you know what? He deserved that win. They have a young team, but he coached them up, and I don't think OU is ready for this game. They had 2 really tough games to prepare for at the very beginning of the season, and it's tough to have 2 top 10 teams to play, 2 top 6 teams now that they've had to play.
They just look completely unprepared in both games, completely overwhelmed by each team. And their season, I mean, OU season, it's pretty much over now, wouldn't you say? Because they're coming off of a playoff berth. You've got to think their goal would be at least get back to the playoff, if not make it in the national championship, have a shot at winning.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the expectations not being met, but their season's most certainly not over. They have some conference games that they can win and maybe get a Big 12 title, and you can't say that doesn't have any meaning to them, but they'll definitely be disappointed in not making the playoff again this year.
Yeah, for sure. The expectations just aren't being met at Norman this year. Move on to...
Actually, I have one more point I'd like to say.
Go ahead.
And clearly, Joe Mixon is not a very avid listener of the Joe College Radio podcast, but maybe he'll listen after I give him this message. Joe, you've seen Deshaun Jackson before, as I said last week to Ray McLeod. You saw Ray McLeod last week, and now you're going to have a great play, run it almost into the end zone, and drop the ball before you get in. Joe, I want to ask you, on behalf of all of the OU fans and all of the sports commentators that are having to talk about this idiotic mistake, I want you to act like that football is your scholarship. And you're going to hold on to that scholarship. And maybe you'll hold on to it a little bit longer than you held on to the football. You've had trouble off the field. You're lucky to be playing college football right now. So I'd recommend you cut down on the mindlessness and get your act together, because it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, in addition to being a scumbag, not the smartest play from Joe Mixon. And the state of Oklahoma continues to attract some of the worst refs because they didn't even catch that. Following the MAC refs masterclass at how to screw up a game last week. Moving on to OU's rivals from south of the Red River, Texas Longhorns fall 43-50 against the California Golden Bears, and this is a hugely disappointing result for the Longhorns, who, after coming up with a victory against Notre Dame, lots of people were prematurely, I think we can definitely say, but still throwing them out as potential playoff competitors.
So I talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast. Texas is playing a little bit like Oklahoma State in that they have a offense that's producing very well, but the defense is not able to keep up with some of these high-powered offenses. And so Cal came in, and with an experienced quarterback like Davis Webb, they were able to pretty much torch the secondary of Texas. And once you spread them out, you're allowed to run too, and so they had a solid running game as well. But there's something about Texas Tech and their ability to lose quarterbacks to other teams, with Baker Mayfield going to OU and Davis Webb going to Cal. But somehow they're able to reload and get a stud like Patrick Mahomes, but that's another story.
Yeah, if their defense could be half as good as their offense, Tech would be in contention for a national title every year.
Absolutely. Cliff Kingsbury knows how to coach an offense.
Yes, he does. But going back to the game real quick, look, I wasn't able to watch a lot of the game because of the Pac-12 after dark, and it's a little bit past my bedtime usually. But just looking at the stats, it looks like Cal just played a pretty much mistake-free game. No turnovers at all. Efficient on third down, 7 of 15. 1 for 2 on fourth down. And Texas, with 2 costly interceptions, only went 23 of 39 through the air. That's just not – if you're running an air raid offense, you got to be throwing the ball better than that if you want to win in a hostile environment.
And, Miles, you talk about the mistake-free offense, but if you look at that fumble at the end, or I guess it's not a fumble anymore, that was essentially an immediate recovery by Texas. Less than 3 seconds, no other players around. There are 3 California players in the end zone and 3 Texas players running behind, and the Texas players recovered it. So it should have been Texas ball with a chance to score.
Yeah, it should have got another chance. It's interesting how many storylines we're having over referees so early in the year. And I think you've got to, with all the incidents of these dropping the ball before the end zone, first of all, coaches better be pounding it into their players. You don't drop the ball unless you hand it to the ref or you're through to the back of the end zone. And secondly, surely the refs at some point are going to start watching, and if there's any doubt that he drops the ball before the goal line, you don't blow the whistle. And if the other team recovers, then you go back and review and check. But it's just inexcusable. This has happened 3 times, and the call's been blown 3 times.
I agree. It's getting ridiculous at this point. These are scholarship players. They're getting paid a lot of money to play football at their schools, and for me to think that obviously I don't have the athletic ability that these Division I athletes have, but I have the brain to understand, hey, once I pass this white line, then I can set the ball down, then I can do whatever stupid cocky celebration these players are doing nowadays. So they just need to get it in their heads that they can hold on to it for one more second before they celebrate. They don't need an immediate celebration.
Yeah, and to make a quick point at the Big 12 right now, the Big 12 has just taken a pounding in this non-conference season. I believe they're 3-10 against other Power 5 schools, which is just a horrible number.
It is, and there are only 2 Big 12 undefeateds left. And I guess you could make a case for Oklahoma State that they should be undefeated. It'd be hard to make a case for Texas because we don't know what happens on that drive after the fumble. But you only have West Virginia and Baylor left. And neither of those teams, I guess Baylor came in highly touted until the whole fiasco with all of their players and coaches. But West Virginia didn't come in with very high expectations. And so it's hard to see a Big 12 team making the playoff this year.
Yeah, I think they've effectively shut them out. And we're not even to week 4 of the season yet. But it's dire times for the Big 12 at the moment.
And it looks like they need a strong addition to the conference.
Well,
like Houston, for example.
We'll be waiting here for a long time before anything happens on expansion, is my hunch.
I'd have to agree.
All right, let's move on to the next big game on the docket, and Louisville versus Florida State. And I have to say, first off, I want to make a personal apology to you, Mr. Lamar Jackson. I doubted you. I didn't think you could come up and show up in a big game like this, perform on the big stage, but you proved me wrong, sir. And now you've made me a believer.
Yeah, I'd have to agree in my lamenting Lamar Jackson. I saw your bowl game last year against the Aggies, a 28-27 victory, and you look like a stud out there. And after this offseason, I kind of forgot about you. And you came to play the first 2 games. I said that you were my dark horse to win the Heisman, but there's no doubt about it now. You are not a dark horse anymore. And with the game that you had, is absolutely incredible. 362 total yards, 5 touchdowns, and in the first 3 games, you've had 1,377 yards and 18 touchdowns. 18 touchdowns accounted for, more than 115 FBS schools, and so it's tough to make an argument at this point for any other player in the country, and you can see the odds makers for the Heisman are able to see that. Miles, do you know what Lamar Jackson's preseason odds were to win the Heisman?
Oh, let me look it up real quick. Lamar.
Miles, I have the answer.
You have.
That was my question.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were wondering what.
No.
Okay, my bad.
That's okay. Okay, so Miles, those were 5,000 to 1. 5,000 to 1 odds, and now this guy looks like he's running away with the Heisman Trophy. And so, hats off to you, Lamar Jackson. You really look like the real deal. Coming against, definitely, before that game, the team that was considered to be the best in the ACC. So, yeah, congratulations. But let's also highlight your defense. Louisville's defense was phenomenal. They were harassing Francois all day and really didn't let Dalvin Cook do anything. Jacquez Patrick pulled off a 44-yard touchdown run, but other than that, the Heisman Trophy contenders for Florida State were essentially held down.
Yeah, the Seminoles, 2 of 13 on third down, 8 of 24 through the air, and had 2 turnovers, 1 interception, 1 fumble. So excellent play by the Louisville Cardinals, and just a sound beating of the Seminoles in this game. All right, moving on to our Thursday night game. The Houston Cougars defeated the Cincinnati Bearcats 40-16, but this game was really closer than the final score indicated.
Absolutely. In the fourth quarter, Cincinnati's up 16-12, and I'm sitting watching this game in my dorm room, and I'm shocked because I can't imagine anyone that picked Cincinnati to win this game. They're a solid team, but based on the way Houston's looked so far, there's no way I was going to pick Cincinnati. And so there was a little bit of reason for Houston to underperform. Greg Ward was playing hurt, not injured, but he was playing hurt with an aggravated shoulder and his throwing shoulder. But this team, as we saw in the fourth quarter, is not just Greg Ward. With 2 pick sixes, they have a phenomenal defense, one of the best in the country. And especially defending the rush, they did not let Cincinnati get anything going on the ground. But you also have to look at Greg Ward's weapons. He's got Bonner and Chance Allen, who really performed well in that game. I believe that they accounted for 13 receptions, just those two. And so they did a great job in Greg Ward's injury, or in him being hurt. They did a great job of carrying some of the load for him that he's usually able to carry on his own.
Yeah, he was a little bit banged up earlier in the game, but he fought through it, and he still played just a phenomenal game to lead the Cougars to victory. But you know what's going to be an interesting matchup? When Houston and Louisville meet later in the season.
Go ahead and circle that on your calendars. November 17th, it's a Thursday night. I really hope I don't have an exam because we don't have a DVR in the dorms. So I'm praying for no exam on the 17th, and that's essentially going to be a play-in game for the playoff based on how those two squads are shaping up.
Yeah, if this continues, heck, maybe even both of them get in. Well, honestly, since Houston's coming from a group of 5, I think they would need to win that game.
If Houston wins the game, I can see Louisville still sneaking in. But it's tough to lose a game that late in the season and sneak in the playoff. It would have to be a very close game.
Yeah.
And they'd also have to win the ACC championship.
Yes. It's just going to be a massive, massive game late in the season. Let's move on. Michigan State versus Notre Dame. And the Michigan State Spartans go on to win 36-28. Notre Dame kind of came back, made it a bit of a game in the end, but Michigan State was ahead for the majority of this game.
Yeah, and you know what? I hate to say it this early in the season, but Brian Kelly is coaching for his job at this point. Notre Dame, I can't remember the last time they dropped 2 of the first 3. Granted, against good teams, but if you're a historical powerhouse like Notre Dame, you can't drop 2 of your first 3 games. Plus, they're playing Duke and South Bend this weekend, which isn't going to be an easy W. I can definitely see a case where Brian Kelly's sent packing mid-season, maybe.
Oh yeah, they're much in the same boat that OU's in right now. They are coming in high expectations, and now they've got no shot to win the playoff. If you go 1-2 to start the season, you're not going to get in, and they don't have a conference title to play for. You know, it's like what are you going to play for? And it doesn't get any easy. It gets a little bit easier, but the Fighting David Cutcliffe's coming to town. You can't underestimate them.
Definitely not. They're always a well-coached team, and they can't bring in the recruits that Notre Dame can, but clearly they have a better coach.
Yes, I'd venture to say that as well. Moving on to my big upset pick of the week, North Dakota State Bison defeat the Iowa Hawkeyes on a last-second field goal, 23-21. There's plenty to talk about during the game, but the main question is, if you're a D1 school, why do you ever schedule this team?
I have no idea, Miles, and I can't think of a reason why. I wouldn't have scheduled them, but if they ended up on my schedule somehow, I would be thankful that they didn't have Carson Wentz on their team. But this kid, Easton Stick, he came to play. He's a tough competitor, and so I underestimated them. I thought with no Carson Wentz, there's no way they're going to challenge Iowa. And Kirk Ferentz, who just got signed to a massive contract through 2026, the Hawkeyes might be rethinking that.
We need to talk about that just for a second. If you don't know, Kirk Ferentz, before the season, extended to 2026, a 10-year contract extension. Money guaranteed through 5 years. And guess what? Guess how many games he has to win per season to get another year of guaranteed money added on?
I believe it's 7.
7 games. If he goes 7-5, he gets 1 more year of guaranteed money. Who do the Iowa Hawkeyes think Kirk Ferentz is? Why on earth would you ever give a coach such a massive, massive contract like this?
Clearly, they they don't care a whole lot about their football program, because if you're willing to extend pay for a 7-5 season, calling that an accomplishment consistently, then I don't know what your problem is, but you've got some big problems in the front office. And I just can't vouch for a team that considers consistent 7-5 success.
Yeah, it's just absolutely crazy that you would. Whoever Kirk Ferentz's agent is, I want him.
Yeah, I agree.
And no matter what I'm doing, I want him negotiating it.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's getting calls from everybody right now. That was highway robbery. It was bad.
And speaking of highway robbery, of course, because North Dakota State is an FCS program, most schools are going to pay them to come and play them. And if you want to, this is a shocking statistic. In the 6 games, they've won their last 6 games against FBS teams. They've made $2.18 million from those teams, from going to play and win.
And beating them.
And yes, going to play, beating the teams, and still taking their money.
And Arkansas has made that mistake a few times. But gosh, I don't think they would ever schedule North Dakota State, knowing the giant killer that they are. And Miles, I'd like to commend you for your pick. That was a phenomenal pick. I'll make sure to pick them next time. But yeah, props to you for that one.
Yep. I mean, hold on a sec. This might be scalding, but North Dakota State to the Big 12.
Wow.
How about that?
That would be that. I mean, they've proven success in the FCS and in the FBS against those opponents that they've played. And clearly geography doesn't matter a whole lot to the Big 12, since they have West Virginia, who's a decent venture away. I mean, it's a possibility.
I mean, with the current way expansion talks are going, why not? Last game of the day that we're going to discuss here, the Michigan Wolverines were victorious over the Colorado Buffaloes, 45-28, but Colorado sure made them work for this.
Yeah, absolutely. 21 points in the first quarter. And this is a tough Buffaloes team. They really, really challenged the Wolverines up front in the first quarter at least. But only scoring 7 points for the rest of the game. That's not going to cut it. And really, Jim Harbaugh came in clutch with those adjustments.
Yeah, just an incredible. They jump out to that 21-7 lead. And at that point, you might think, what's going on here? But then, of course, Michigan with a dominating 38-7 run to seal things up. They'll seal things up in that game.
And this game, some of you might be thinking, Jordan, what are you thinking about your college football playoff 4th pick? And this solidifies my pick even further. They're able to go down 21-7 in the first quarter and make the proper adjustments to be successful in the rest of the game.
Yeah, like we said earlier with Louisville and Houston, the big game at the end of the year, Michigan versus Ohio State, could well be a play-in for the playoff.
And then they still have to get past whoever they play in the Big Ten championship game. And not that that's very much of a threat. Wisconsin just barely sneaks by Georgia State. And, I mean, the Big Ten looked pretty bad this weekend. They were able to pull out the victories in the end, but they looked bad early, and that does not bode well for the perception of the conference.
Yeah, I think maybe a trend we're starting to see this year, of course it's too early to say for sure, but like aside from the Big 12, it seems each team or each conference has one elite team or 2 elite teams, and the rest of the conference is really struggling in their non-conference to even win games. You've got Stanford. Stanford is carrying the banner for the Pac-12. Michigan and Ohio State in the Big
Don't
10.
look past Washington, though.
Yeah, Washington.
They're not getting the press. They're not getting the press they deserve. They have a very explosive offense.
So as we wrap up with this week's game, let's go ahead and look to next week. We mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but first up, possibly the game of the week. Number 17, Arkansas, visiting number 10, Texas A&M. Jordan, how do you see this playing out?
I doubted Arkansas a little bit against TCU. I ended up picking TCU because I thought after a week 1 showing, they wouldn't be prepared to play against a team like TCU. And Texas A&M is built almost exactly opposite of TCU. They've got a very stout defense, which is different than how they've been in the past, and not that fantastic of an offense. So I think this plays to right in Arkansas's hands. We have a very strong defense, very good against the run, and a little spotty against the pass, but they really have shored up since week one. I think Arkansas is going to go into Jerry's world and take one home for Jerry himself.
I'm sure Jerry will be very happy about that.
By the way, just to add this fun fact, Jerry Jones was an offensive lineman for the 1964 National Championship Arkansas Razorbacks.
You wouldn't expect that seeing him in the present day, but who looks like they used to in college anyway. Next up, a huge game for the Cowboys as they open up conference play in Waco against the Baylor Bears, and I'll be at this game. Jordan, again, do you have any thoughts on how this is going to go down?
You know, Baylor looks fairly solid, but if Baylor's secondary can't keep up with Oklahoma State, it's going to look just like this week against Pitt. And the defense at least, will look a lot like that. And I could definitely see OSU going in and upsetting Baylor. They haven't really seen a team like Oklahoma State that can air it out. So I'm a little apprehensive to make a pick at this point. They're both solid teams. But Miles, what do you think about it? I know where your heart lies, but what are you going to think as you go into the stadium?
I think, first of all, if Mason Rudolph has anything less than an A or an A-plus game, we've got no shot. This team goes as far as Mason is going to carry it.
That's absolutely right.
But on the other side, Baylor has not looked that great this year. Of course, their final scores of their game has made it look better, but they played a cupcake week one. They struggled in the first half against SMU, and then once again, they struggled in the first half against Rice. I believe that game was 6-6 at halftime.
It was.
So it seems like slow starts have been a hallmark of their season so far. If they do it again, OSU has to be able to take advantage of that, because at some point the Bears offense is going to come alive.
And just to defend Baylor, there was a green laser being shot on the field in that Rice game, so I'm sure they were thrown for a loop. I bet that had a gigantic impact on the game, because it's not like there aren't other distractions or anything.
Oh, of course. I mean, you can almost say that Rice should have just forfeited the game because a distraction so overwhelming as that occurred.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't evacuate the stadium, to be honest. It was a serious safety threat. I personally thought that there was a missile being shot in, and that was the aiming device that the person was looking through on their reticle. But I don't know. I can't say that game should even count towards Baylor's record.
Think just strike it from the record. It never even happened.
Even call their season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should just give Baylor the national championship right now. How are they going to be able to play next week after such an emotional struggle and fight to get out of the game after something like that happened? How are they even going to be expected to play in the rest of their games?
And I'm glad I wasn't there, because I might have been in tears. That had to be hard to watch. I'm sure the parents were terrified. I know the refs left the field in the middle of the game and got out as quickly as they could. They had the mascots put on the referees' jerseys. It was. I'm sure glad I wasn't there. They're going to have to take a lot more safety precautions as the season goes along.
Yeah, and last note, on a non-football related note, I don't know if you saw this, but the Rice Band's performance, I honestly, I don't know, any of the listeners, you may disagree, but I thought that was hilarious.
Yes, this is on a serious note. Clearly, the past few minutes have been in a joking tone. That was a very bold move. We've seen, I believe it was Kansas last year or a few years ago, that did a similar thing, and they didn't get the reaction that they wanted. And it was a bold move by the Rice Band, and they got the publicity they wanted. Whether it was good or bad, I'm not sure. I haven't really followed the reaction, but it was a very bold move by the Rice Band.
Yeah, bold move, but I think needed. I think more people should know about this, and more scrutiny should be applied to Baylor with how they've handled everything, because everything is not settled down in Waco. Moving on to the next big game, we've got number 19 Florida at number 14 Tennessee. Who you got, the Gators or Rocky Top?
You know, I'm very disappointed in this game because obviously Tennessee's underperformed pretty much all year. They struggled with the Bobcats this weekend, and Florida would have been a runaway pick for me. But with Del Rio getting injured by a low blow, just an egregious attack by the outside linebacker for North Texas, it's going to be tough. I don't know much about their backup quarterback, but I know Jim McElwain was furious at that very aggressive attack by the linebacker.
Yeah, this is a tough one to call, because if Luke Del Rio is going to be out for the game, it places a lot of questions on whether Florida's going to be able to move the ball. But at the same time, like you said, Tennessee just has not looked good this year, only winning by 9 against Ohio. Of course, they took care of Virginia Tech, but needing overtime to beat Appalachian State, I'm not putting my faith into them just yet. And to wrap this up, the SEC East is wide open this year. Any team's going to be, especially after Georgia's game, barely beating Missouri. And who knows who's going to come out of the SEC East?
I think if Luke Del Rio comes back, Florida is far and away the best team in the East. But it's going to hurt not having him this week if that's the decision.
Yeah, for sure. Next top game up. This is the biggest matchup between the two highest ranking teams. Number 11 Wisconsin at number 8 Michigan State. Two teams come off of very different games. Michigan State with a statement win at Notre Dame on the road, really controlling most of that game. But Wisconsin struggling greatly against Georgia State, only winning by 6 points in the end.
Yeah, Miles, this is a bit of a disappointment. Wisconsin and Michigan State are a little bit overrated in my opinion, but there's no way I could pick Wisconsin to win this game after they're showing against Georgia State. And I mean, that's really all I can say about it. Michigan State played a good game against Notre Dame, and I can definitely see them pulling this one out with ease.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit right there, Jordan. I think people are sleeping a little bit on Michigan State this year. I think they're very underrated, even though they're ranked number 8. Haven't been talked about a lot. They've been lost amid the Michigan and Ohio State hype, which is warranted. But at the same time, Michigan State has the quality. They've got Mark D'Antonio, who's a savvy coach. They've got the opportunity to possibly make some noise in the Big Ten.
I would actually have to agree with that. They solely because they perform far over expectations in the underdog position. And so anytime, except for the the college football playoff game last year, which was clearly one of the worst games I've seen ever. Anyways,
that was an awful game.
It was. But getting back to this year's Michigan State squad, they perform very well as the underdog, and I'm sure it was a bit disgusting to them to see that they're the higher rated team against Notre Dame and still the underdog. Mark D'Antonio's got his boys fired up, and I think they'll march out with a victory, but I still can't put them in that upper echelon with Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, they'll definitely have to earn it this year, and they'll definitely have the opportunities to. All right, our last game we're going to preview in this podcast, number 12 Georgia at number 23 Ole Miss, and Ole Miss definitely coming off a very disappointing result, but Georgia needed a last-second touchdown on a 4th and 10 to top Missouri, woeful Missouri. How do you see? Do either of these teams really belong in the top 25 at all?
Yeah, this is where the polls are very deceiving. Having Ole Miss be below Georgia, the record clearly shows that Ole Miss should not be in the top 25. It doesn't show that for Georgia, but they should not be in the top 25 either. And I think Ole Miss is going to run away with this game. I'm just not very impressed by Eason or Lambert, the quarterbacks for Georgia. Nick Chubb has had a decent season, but when you're one-dimensional, it's not hard, no matter how great the player is, to stop him. So I definitely see Ole Miss taking a win at Oxford against a debatably top 25 team. I guess they are top 25, but I would debate the fact that they should be. But I definitely see them taking the victory, like I said, in Oxford at the Grove.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if Ole Miss, if they can play a complete game, if they don't choke in the second half like they've been doing it, they should be able to run away with this easily. Georgia just hasn't looked very impressive to me. They struggled against Nichols. They needed a last-minute touchdown to beat Mizzou. I'm really doubting their quality. All right, let's get to our listener questions of the week. Like I said, we're recording this a little bit early, so I apologize if you weren't able to get your question in. Still, tweet at us or message us on Facebook, and we'll answer those on either social media as the week goes on. So don't be afraid to answer your question. But we've got a couple lined up here. Jordan, let's see what you got.
At Blake Broadhurst writes, and by the way, I'd just like to say, Blake Broadhurst is one of our favorite fans of the podcast, the FFOTP, the original FFOTP, if I might add. So he's a great guy, a very avid listener. I'd just like to thank him for his loyalty to the podcast. I'm sure Miles feels the same way. Let's get to the question. Blake Broadhurst writes, who you got for the game day game next week? Miles, I'd just like to answer this question. Go ahead and put it out of the way. This morning it was actually revealed that Knoxville will be the destination for game day this week as Florida takes on Tennessee. And with Luke Del Rio being out, it doesn't look like it's going to be a very exciting game. Miles, what are your thoughts?
This is just a trash selection. This is complete and utter garbage. There are so many more deserving games of game day.
And I agree. Florida is a great team, but to have Tennessee be in there, they've already had their shot at game day. I don't want to see them again. It's disappointing that they get another shot with the type of season they've had. And I think Florida will still win this game, even with Luke Del Rio out, just because Tennessee can't do anything, especially not against this fantastic Florida defense. And their secondary, they'll have at least 2 interceptions against Tennessee, possibly 3. All right, and the second part of Blake Broadhurst's question is Louisville National Championship, and I guess we can go ahead and lump that together with the third portion, which is Lamar Jackson a Heisman lockdown? Miles, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like you said, these two questions kind of go hand in hand with the recent Heisman Trophy winners either participating in or winning the national championship. But I've got to say, at this point in the season, Louisville should definitely be in the conversation for a playoff and national championship berth, and Lamar Jackson absolutely should be the Heisman frontrunner right now. If he keeps up this play, I think he'll definitely be in New York holding up that Heisman Trophy, and maybe, just maybe, holding up that elongated golden ball with the College Football Playoff National Championship.
Yeah, Miles, that's a very interesting way to describe the College Football Playoff Trophy. But to answer the question, Louisville should definitely be in the national championship this year. They have the talent, and I can say it definitively right now, they have the talent to be in the national championship game. And clearly we saw Lamar Jackson is a beast. And like we said last week, if Louisville's going to make it to the College Football Playoff and ultimately to the national championship game, Lamar Jackson is going to have to win the Heisman. And so with my prediction being that they make it to the championship game, or at least the playoff, but probably the championship game, I'd have to say that Lamar Jackson will win the Heisman as well. He absolutely, at this moment, hands down is the winner. And I can see him holding the Heisman Trophy, and I can also see him lifting up the College Football Playoff Trophy.
Or as it's also known, the elongated golden ball.
And now that I'm saying that, I didn't have Louisville in my College Football Playoff last week, but after this impressive showing this week, I think they have a great chance to go into Houston and take the Cougars down. They look like a more complete team. If Greg Ward continues to sustain injuries, I mean, who knows if he's even going to be playing in that game. And so I think that they're going to go into Houston and come out with a fairly convincing victory over the Cougars. And our second fan question of the day, we have Nick Irwin 5, who writes, is Texas really a powerhouse this year? And Miles, who's your Big 12 champion?
Well, I think it's time we all cool the brakes on the Texas is back narrative, because after their upset loss against California, they seem a little more beatable to everybody, and the playoff hype is definitely going to go down now. And as regarding the Big 12 champion, this conference is so wide open at the moment. You could convince me that 5 or 6 teams are capable of winning the championship. So on this, I have no idea. You get back to me in 2 or 3 weeks, and I may have a better answer. But at this point, to be honest, every team has played so poorly that there's no one has stood out.
And I look at this Texas squad, and I agree with you. They are not a powerhouse in the Big 12 or on the national landscape. The offense looked fairly good. Shane Buechele is performing well. Tyrone Swoops has found his niche in the offense, but their defense has more holes than Swiss cheese. It's pathetic. And the Big 12 offenses are going to have a field day against them. It's going to be a shootout every game, and I don't think that their offense is as good as a lot of the offenses in the Big 12, so ultimately they'll be outscored. As for my Big 12 champion prediction, I've got TCU. People are overlooking TCU. They played a very good game against the Razorbacks, and it was their first tough competition of the year. It came down to a very, very crazy ending with a blocked field goal. And so, I mean, Gary Patterson gets his team ready to play every week. And he's a championship coach. He's gotten his team to the Rose Bowl. I didn't believe in them then. And I didn't believe in them coming into this season competing for the Big 12 champion. But I can definitely see it now, and I think they've proven a lot thus far.
Yeah, playing Arkansas tough, and like I said, anybody's got a chance once conference play starts up real quick.
They've also got a win over a Big 12 opponent in Iowa State. And so they're starting off with a leg up, and they got a good head start on the field.
Yep. They'll have a real tough test this weekend when the Sooners come to town. That's when they'll be able to prove whether they're legit title contenders or not. And OU may see their season go down in flames right before their eyes if they lose 3 out of 4 to start the season. All right, our last question today from Lucas Gender at Big G23, also an FFOTP, fellow paddle person here at OSU. He asks, was that the most dominating complete game you've ever seen by the Oklahoma State wide receivers? Pitt literally had no answer deep. I would have to say it was definitely one of the best games I've seen from the OSU receivers. Of course, you had Washington running riot all over the secondary and running free from the very first play of the game, that 92-yard touchdown throw. But the other players stepped up and made plays too. They were making catches. The only dropped ball I saw was whenever Washington got hit over the middle, and there was debate over whether it was a fumble or an incomplete pass, which was eventually ruled an incomplete pass. So thank you for dropping that pass, James Washington. But, I mean, it was just an all-around, overall solid game by the receivers and a good performance.
Yeah, I think the receiving core performed very well, but like you said, it was the James Washington show this weekend. And almost going for 300 yards, it's one of the best performances I've seen by a single wide receiver in a long time.
Yeah, I'm still shocked he didn't get to 300. He was at 225 at halftime. 300 is the mark to beat for the single-game receiving record set by a Darius Bowman back in 2009 against Kansas. So I'm a little bit surprised they went away from him in the second half, but this isn't the last time you're going to hear about James Washington putting up big numbers this year. I can guarantee you that.
And with him getting a 92-yard reception to start the game, 14 seconds into the game, I can't do the math that quickly, but imagine what he was on pace to get. 92 yards every 14 seconds.
Yeah, we need on-pace guy here to come let us know what his final total is going to be.
While that wouldn't be a very realistic representation of what he could do, it'd be an interesting stat.
For sure, for sure. All right, this concludes this week of the Joe College Radio podcast. Just want to thank everybody for listening. We've got a big week of games coming up. Again, I apologize for it being a little bit earlier, but like I said earlier, still tweet us, post on Facebook your questions. We'll answer them on social media. Jordan, any last words you want to say?
And to add on to that, we'd also like you to spread the word about this podcast to your friends and family. We had a great boost in followers this weekend, and it's all thanks to you guys. You're getting the word out, allowing people to listen to our podcast and get a good dose of college football in the middle of the week whenever there's not a whole lot going on. We're very glad to have such a loyal following as you guys. So thank you so much.
I echo the sentiment. Best podcast fans in the world. Write that down right now. Not a hot take at all.
That's the coolest take. Everyone knows it.
The coolest take you'll ever hear on this show, folks. Guaranteed. All right, once again, thank you all for listening.